Ready, Set, Data. We have Lee Markham, database extraordinaire. Database administrator. Hi there. Anthony Forner, data engineer. I'm happy to be here. How about you, Lee? You doing good?
Yeah, it's been an interesting week, but yeah, I'm doing fine. Looking forward to travels that are coming up, and I'll be gone all next week, so it'll be a fun time of learning and meeting people. I'm excited for it.
So I guess moving on to the topic. So originally I was thinking, hey, 2022, I'll do 22 databases, and I'll just like do some cliff notes on all of them. There is a distinct possibility that's way too much for a live stream, so we'll just run through a bunch of them and see where it goes. I will say that if we get close to the end, I might skip. So this is somewhat in order. So
Okay.
I may skip ahead to some of the choice ones that I picked that may not have been the top 20. So it's basically the top 20, and then I added a few ones I just wanted to talk about.
Okay, it sounds good to me.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, so there's gonna be 2 links that are shared in the comments in the YouTube video and possibly elsewhere in live stream land, Discord maybe. That I was the 2 main sources of information I looked for. One article was from NoSQL, top 20 databases used in 2022. And the other one is, and I'll put on the screen right now, Stack Overflow, which as a developer, I tend to look there for information all the time anyway. So it's good to see what the developers are saying. First thing I'll address is what do you mean by top databases? Like, are they the best to use? Are they the most popular? So a lot of information goes into deciding that. Some of the ranking systems go by literally number of mentions in the system. So various websites, how many times they brought up. I think that's how Stack Overflow does all of their programming and database ranking systems. Literally, how much chatter is there about a database because someone's using it and they have a problem to solve, right?
Right.
So that's a good way. There's also ranking systems as far as Google and Bing, and that's a little complicated as all data work is. You have to go, Oracle and database, but not Oracle or MySQL or whatever else. It has to be database stuff, database related.
Some's by revenue.
By revenues, that was a good one. Frequency of technical discussions, and then this one's interesting. Number of job offers. Because
okay.
Right. So if it's open source and there's no entity making money, or if there is, open source has, I think, some monetization issues. I mean, free and open source makes it hard to make money. So some of those companies may not make as much money as, let's say, a Oracle or a Microsoft, right? So, but if they're one of the top 3 positions you can have working, let's say MySQL, that's a big one, right? Then obviously, regardless of how much money the master company is making, that's an industry standard there if all the developers are banging against it, right?
Right. Yeah. For sure.
One bullet point that wasn't on the list that from one of the sites that I was surprised wasn't was general administrator stress level. Because I would think like the more stressed out the administrator, the more developers are working against it, right? That makes sense. That's clearly not cool.
Yeah.
And the last one nowadays, relevance in social networks. So they counted in one of the surveys the number of Twitter tweets. Is that actually how you say that? I mean, that's their wording. Number of Twitter tweets from twits on Twitter, and which system is mentioned. That's how you say it, right?
Yeah.
Is it a twit who twits on Twitter? Who tweets on Twitter? Sally.
Yes, let's jumble all the words together as much as possible.
Sally was tweeting about seashells on the seashore.
Yes, that's exactly what happened.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, frequency, numbers of tweets about a topic. Certainly, that makes sense that would be at least considered. Stress level of the people who are administering it. I'm not sure how you gauge that. I mean, that is an interesting idea. I guess you would have to survey the people who are responsible for installing it and or keeping it going or tweaking it as it runs, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Or maybe flip that over. If they're not stressed, then it's a good database to get into. Top 10 database to get into because, you know, the DBAs feel like they have a good work-life balance.
Yeah, I suppose. That absolutely. I mean, that reminds me of something I saw on Twitter where someone that I recently started following who is into tech, the person said that they would consider being a database administrator if it weren't for the on-call. Like, well, okay, that's fair. There certainly is on-call, and with on-call comes long hours and stress and all of those other things. So certainly I could see how that could be a metric for success or popularity for a particular platform.
Someone needs to get on that ranking of databases and the DBAs, how much on-call work they have to do. That'd be interesting. But is that the database's fault or is that the developer's fault?
That's an excellent question that we should save for another time.
Yes, let's do it. All right. The first one on the list. I promise I didn't do this to troll you, just in case. I have no idea what your feelings are. I don't know if this will trigger you. But the number one on the list is not Microsoft SQL Server. It's Oracle. Is that shocking?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of shocking, but I mean, Oracle's a big player, so we can talk about them first. No big deal.
Okay. So again, I didn't want to make this whole thing take a long time, so not necessarily a full history lesson, everything. So let's dig in. Oracle, developed in 1979. I wasn't even developed in 1979. By the current CTO of Oracle, Larry Ellison. I hope that's accurate. Oracle remains a popular SQL database, especially for enterprise-grade RDBMs. It is used by major Fortune 500 companies around the world for the transaction. And I noted that it's not open source. So
definitely not open source, because I was going to do this to indicate you need piles and piles and piles of cache. So I've heard.
Yeah.
To run Oracle.
Some advice that I've heard before is if you're trying to decide what to do for a career, and if you're thinking of being a DBA, even if you're not thinking about being a DBA, if you're thinking about what to do for a career, always choose to be the guy standing next to the most expensive machine in the area.
That's a good thought.
So, I mean, I'm going to guess Oracle administrators are not going hungry.
Probably not. That's I would agree with that assessment. They're probably well paid and doing good work to keep that system going and keep their IT teams and companies happy.
Yep. All right. I'll move on to number 2. MySQL, another one I'm sure you've heard of. MySQL is a database from the Oracle Corporation. It was released in 1995, so it's not a boomer. It has been at the top of many ranking lists for a long time. I concur. It was the first database I bumped up against. My first lines of SQL against MySQL. I mean, not your SQL, MySQL. You see it right at the top of database engines rankings consistently year after year.
Yeah,
no matter which ranking, we talked about a couple different ways you rank. MySQL ends up in the list all the time.
Yeah, it's an extremely popular platform, and I used it several companies ago where I had exposure to it. There was another person there who was a MySQL and PHP developer, and he built on top of that system a ticketing platform that also, I believe, happened to be open source. And so it was pretty popular. We could do a lot of things with it. It was kind of interesting to work with. I've been interested in MySQL for quite a while. So I'd like to get some more exposure to that. Could be fun to learn MySQL.
Yeah. I should have said this earlier. I'm not an expert in most of these, practically all of these different databases. These are just cliff notes I got off either their site, Wikipedia, did a little bit of whatever just to make this a quick review. So I just realized I should have said that, because the next thing I have noted here is I found that a few things I feel might be why MySQL is so popular. Open source, so you can access that code and get installed anywhere, not without a lot of red tape. I would think. It's, even though I cracked a joke about it being from '95 and not being a boomer, it's been around long enough that it's considered mature. So its maturity probably helps make it popular for web applications.
Wait, MySQL has only been in existence since 1995? Interesting.
So you question that, it's making me nervous, but that's what I have. Yeah.
No, I have no authority by which to question it. I'm just intrigued.
I mean, that's mature. Like,
it kind of makes some sense, actually, if we think about early SQL Server versions. So anyway, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I feel like since it's open source, you can just get it going real quick. But it's not the new hotness. It's been around. It's a good place for someone who's getting into industry to start. So throwing up a quick web page, or you said a ticketing system. MySQL sounds like it's a good thing to do. I believe it's the backend for sites like WordPress. That alone probably makes it popular on just a raw number of instances out there. WordPress is everywhere.
It is.
And per what I read, you want to get full featured. I feel like I'm going to contradict myself in a second. You have a full database up and running, and it's open source with MySQL, but you'll be missing some advanced data protection features like throttling and masking. It also doesn't seem to have a lot of support for semi-structured data in JSON. If I'm out of date, let me know in the comments. Tell me I'm wrong. That's how I learn.
I really wish I'd talked to the non-SQL Server DBA a bit about MySQL before tonight's stream to just kind of get his take on it, to refresh my mind in terms of MySQL versus other platforms. He does seem to be fairly impressed with SQL Server versus something like MySQL, but in terms of the fullness of the features and the long list of things it does. But I mean, MySQL certainly is a capable platform, or it wouldn't always be on the list of databases to check out. It's always there, like you said at the beginning. So yeah,
it was number 2 on this list, and I see it consistently on the top. The next one, you may not have heard of this, MS SQL, number 3 on the list. Also not open source, but it does have a developer edition, so which I think is a good answer to that. Anyone can still get the developer edition to play, fiddle, and do a lot of work, as long as you're honest for a production workload, right?
Yeah, and they have an Express edition that you can do production workloads with, and you can build apps on top of. There's a data size limit there. I think they up to 10 gig, I believe. So each database on the Express instance can be up to 10 gigabytes in size, which isn't a lot, but it's enough it's enough to build a functioning app for sure.
It was first released, and you can check me on this. It was first released in 1989, so I was around. It's a popular Microsoft database offering. It's a paid database. As I mentioned, it's not free and open source. And I believe it tends to have a lot of corporate support due to the Microsoft brand name, compatibility, support for Microsoft applications, right? Like all things Microsoft, you're part of the ecosystem, right? It works well with .NET and all the other corporate enterprise grade tooling.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that gives SQL Server such a long reach is the Microsoft brand. People are tied into Microsoft in various ways, whether some people love that, some people hate that. Some people are kind of like, I don't really care. But the reality is Microsoft has a huge footprint. And if you are running Microsoft and you need a database, then you choose SQL Server because that's what they offer. At least that's what they offer traditionally. That is changing, as we will find out when you mention something else that's on the list. But on-premise SQL Server is certainly the choice if you are running Microsoft software. That's what your developers are going to expect because they're doing .NET work. It has a ton of features that make it the obvious choice for companies that are running Microsoft platforms.
I was wondering if this would be a good soundbite, but did you know that SQL Server runs on Windows and has supported Linux distributions since 2017? We got Red Hat Enterprise Linux, SUSE. I'm gonna go with SUSE. SUSE Linux Enterprise Server, Ubuntu 16.04, and the Docker engine. So you think Microsoft, you think Windows, but you can also get your hands on it in the Linux ecosystem.
Yeah, that's a good point that I don't think about, and shame on me. But I guess it's because I'm not in the Linux world. I don't work with Linux, but they did that, of course, on purpose to broaden the reach of their product. It's if you could get it on Windows and Linux, then that helps with the folks who maybe are in a Microsoft world, but they don't really want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so
I'm a Linux wannabe.
Those folks can create a Linux instance or spin up Linux servers, and you can still put Microsoft SQL Server on it. Oh.
Beautiful. This next one, if it's okay to move on.
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't a top 5, I would have been shocked. I wonder if you know what's coming. Tell me if this is on your mental list as well. Postgres.
Yes.
Postgres
has become very popular in the last few years, especially.
Yeah, it seems like it. Initially released in 1989, Postgres was born at the University of California, Berkeley. So that's kind of cool. Originally, it was called Postgres. It was originally named Postgres as the successor to the Ingress database. In '96, it became Postgres, like PostgreSQL, PostgreSQL, to indicate SQL support, and the site's PostgreSQL.org. It's a powerful open source object relational database with over 35 years of active development, and has earned strong reputation for reliability, feature robustness, and performance. And what that snippet didn't mention, because I grabbed that from the interwebs, right, is also I feel like there's tons of modules people can just install. There's if you're missing core functionality, there's something you can just install. I don't know how that works, but I hear all the time people said, we popped this in and now it's faster for this, or it handles this kind of data. It's a graph database now, kind of a transformer, I guess. I should not speak authoritatively on that. I hear people talking about it, and that's what it sounds like. So it's kind of exciting. It's on my bucket list of databases to play with.
Yeah, I think if I were starting today, I might look at Postgres pretty early because it is very popular, and it does have that modular format that you're talking about. I've also heard and read that as well. If you need a functionality, there might be something you can install and just kind of plug into the platform to get what you need. And I find that pretty interesting feature, and it would be, I think that would be quite intriguing to play with that sort of thing, to see, what can I make it do this time?
Yep. The next item on the list, well, let me give you this little clue what it's going to be. I said we're going to go through a list of databases. I did not say SQL databases.
Okay.
So the next database on the list is also something that I hear about constantly.
MongoDB.
Yeah. It's an open source document-based database that stores data inside a collection of documents rather than in rows and columns like other databases. It has native sharing and index support. So even though it's a NoSQL, non-SQL, not just SQL database, it has a lot of native tooling, including index support. So it doesn't have to be slow. I hear it's really fast, actually. I hear it's a very speedy thing, as long as you're okay not having some of the more if you need more ACID and more standard database data modeling, then it's just a bunch of documents. It's documents all the way down.
Yeah, it is very popular. You hear about it quite frequently. I haven't worked with it. I'm kind of intrigued by it. It sounds interesting, but also kind of weird to me. The document database. I mean, I know that Mongo is not the only kind of document database. But I mean, it probably sounds weird to me because I'm firmly planted in the relational model. So
yeah. I mean, it's kind of our world, right?
Yeah, it is. It is my world.
The next one on the list, I have way too much information about this. I don't know what I was thinking. I think I was drunk on information. Next up, IBM Db2.
Yeah.
And if we want to talk about the bedrock of companies for so many years, it's got to be this, right? It's got to be. So I guess I'll run through some of this. DB2 is a family of data management projects, including database servers, developed by, you guessed it, IBM. They initially supported a relational model, but were extended to export object relational features and non-relational structures like JSON, XML. I did not know that. Again, I got drunk with information on this one. The brand name was originally styled as DB/2, then DB2 until 2017 until 2017 finally changed to its present form. So DB2 traces roots back to the beginning of the 70s when Edgar Codd, maybe you've heard of him, a researcher working for IBM, described the theory of relational databases. And in June of 1970, he published a model for data manipulation. So I won't read the rest. Again, I don't know why I have so much on there. But in like 74, IBM San Jose Research Center developed System R, and then DSL Alpha, and then they didn't do everything the COD specification, so they made another query language called SQL.
Nice.
No, I'm not trolling you. SEQUEL. SQL. So SQL is what COD wanted, but SQL is what they ended up creating. When IBM released its first relational database product, they wanted to have a commercial quality sublanguage as well. So it overhauled SQL and they renamed it Structured Query Language to differentiate it between SQL and SQL. And then also SQL, SEQUELE, was a trademark of the UK-based Hawker Siddeley Aircraft Company. So that is
interesting.
The whole debate between is it SQL or SQL.
That's the core of it right there.
They invented SQL. I'm pronouncing it wrong on purpose. SQL, and then they're like, oh, no, we need to make it more commercially viable. So we'll create SQL. And they want to differentiate between that and SQL because SQL was a trademark. So now we know. Now we know.
Now we know.
Okay. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, you and I both have exposure to the DB2 platform. I actually was using it. I was using an application that was built on top of it before I realized that that's what I was doing years and years ago. It was an application that we use it to schedule cab rides for people. And they always talked about connecting to the AS400.
Is this when you worked at Uber?
This was long before Uber was a thing. Experience, the observation I have is that it seems to just work. Like it rarely had problems. It didn't go down. It didn't have to be rebooted all the time. It just ran. And I think there's something to be said for that. You want availability, you want a platform that just works. And I think the IBM DB2 platform does that.
Yeah, it's a foundation for so many companies. We have experience in multiple companies, and we know that IBM Db2 is there. I happen to know it's at banks, right? Financial institutions and insurance institutions. Again, it's a foundation for a lot of things.
Right.
Yep. The next one, drum roll, Redis. I don't know if that's something that feels popular to you, but I know on the dev side of things, it's super popular. Redis is an open source in-memory data store, uses both a database and a caching system. It provides various structures like strings, lists, hashes, sorted sets, range queries, geospatial indexes, bitmaps, hyperlogs, and streams. One note that I found was numbers will be hard to find. But as far as speed is concerned, numbers are kind of hard to find. The general answer is Redis is 10 to 30% faster when working with data sets that fit within its working memory. Once that amount of data succeeds, Redis fails. So basically, if you give enough RAM to hold all of the data, it'll blow other things out of the water. If you make it not use RAM, then other databases will become
okay. I mean, you could say that about any database platform, I would think. If you have 128 gig of RAM and you only have 64 gig of database to put in there, it's all going to go in memory and it's all going to be really fast. The slowest thing is going to be reading data off a disk. So once that's done and it's loaded, memory is going to be much faster, I would think, no matter what platform you're on. Now, maybe Redis, still excels when you compare it to things like in-memory OLTP on SQL Server and other platforms. I'm sure have their own versions of in-memory structures that they use to make things go faster. But I don't have. I'm familiar with one platform that I interact with that has Redis, but I don't know anything about it directly. So I don't know. I'm skeptical, but I'm willing to be made a believer.
Okay. Well, again, I'm going to the internet. I'm taking cliff notes of all the different things. So, this is their sales pitch, so to speak. But a lot of this is I get a lot of my data from Wikipedia. So I take a little notes from the top 20 site, and I go, and I thought that was interesting. Like basically, they're saying it has the same weakness that you mentioned. A lot of databases will have. The moment it's on RAM, it's slower. But they're trying to say, when you compare apples to apples and it's RAM to RAM, they're going to win. It's what they're searching here, which is interesting. Like if you have a particular data set that you want to keep in RAM so it's hot, they're like, hey, if you're going to do that, come over to us. But it's not a relational database, right?
Sure.
And also it's open source. For some companies, that's super important.
Yeah.
Next one, batter up. ElastiCache. Okay. I was clearly a little information drunk on this one too. You can kind of, if you saw my notes, you can kind of tell what items I was like super interested in. Like the IBM one, way too much information. There's no way we're going to go through all this here. I don't want people to sleep. But ElastiCache is a search engine based on the Lucene library. It is distributed, multi-tenant, full text search capable engine with I'm assuming built-in HTTP web interface, and it handles schema-free JSON documents. It is developed in Java, and it is dual license under source code available, server-side public license. I shouldn't read license information. I don't know all that means. And the license, Elastic license. Don't know the difference between the two, but it is interesting that it has two licenses. Somebody up there knows why that's important. I just found it interesting. The clients that you can use come in Java, .NET, C#, PHP, Python, Ruby, and other languages. I don't know why that is, but that's super interesting. And then according to DB Engine's ranking, Elastic is the most popular enterprise search engine. We can use any kind of documents. And again, I was clearly information drunk here. Talks about delegating operations to shards. So I guess It scales horizontally. Anything that can do that natively sounds super powerful. But I can't speak to that. Super interesting. There's a whole thing I can then hear about coordinators and delegation operators, and I shouldn't even read that. Super interesting, right? Like, I'm used to SQL Server being very monolithic, and opine here, please. But I feel like it seems to be very monolithic, and then you're like, oh, I'm going to stand up another big one, but it's probably more the implementation that I just happen to see. So hearing things that are like natively like, oh, we're going to act like tribbles and just seems super interesting. It's a professional definition of
that's hilarious. You did hit a nerve right there without, well, maybe you did realize it, but
I didn't. I wasn't trying to. So
I know. So about the scalability,
I didn't say SQL Server isn't scalable, for the record. I was talking about native, like some things are built to just that's their purpose. But anyway, defending myself a little bit. But go on.
So you referenced SQL Server as a monolithic platform, and when I hear that, people say that, and then they say snarky, mean things. Sometimes. I know you didn't, but it triggered. It alerted something in me when you referred to it that way, and I just want to go on record as saying that almost all of the scalability problems that I see, the scalability problems that SQL Server has, is related to something that we're all familiar with about computers, which is called garbage in, garbage out. If you don't design for the platform that you're using, it will not work properly in the way that you expect. And I'm sure that that's true of everything that we've mentioned so far. MySQL, Elasticsearch, Redis, they probably all have certain things that someone using them should do.
Yep.
And if you don't do those things, probably not going to work as well as you had hoped, no matter what platform you're on. If you have a 2 terabyte database and you can only fit 512 gigabyte into your Redis probably isn't a silver bullet for you in that case.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress.
Oh, absolutely. I was just more commenting on how when I interact with SQL Server, that's typically how it's used. It's like big and sturdy, and you don't get the impression that it's horizontal scalable. I mean, you both know there's all kinds of tricks, especially with high availability, and you can there's ways to legally get at the data that's in the secondaries. I personally have a thing on my bucket list. I just have to wait for the correct opportunity, because I can't just put out in production crazy ideas. But I would like to at some point have a couple SQL servers inside of Docker instances, little tiny SQL servers. I think that's something I'd like to play with. Someone out there probably already has. So comment in the below if you've seen that.
Right.
Because whenever I bring it up, people I talk to always like, no, or they have issues with volumes, or that's what backups are for. Anyway.
Yep.
That's what I triggered you, I promise. Next one up, batter up. Cassandra, which is just a pretty name, I think. Apache Cassandra is an open source, NoSQL distributed database. I promise I'm not trying to trigger you again. Trusted by thousands of companies for scalability and high availability without compromising performance. Linear scalability, proven fault tolerance on commodity hardware or cloud infrastructure, make it a perfect platform for mission critical data. Cassandra support for replicating across multiple data centers is considered best in class. So again, this is not a statement that other databases don't have high availability or don't have. Sure. I'm reading this as like horizontal scaling again, right? But this is one of the databases that like leaned into that. Some point, maybe if we get to it tonight, we'll talk about CockroachDB, which leaned into another aspect. But like this leaned into the scalability. So like that's just what they wanted it to be really good at. At least that's what I'm picking up from like their marketing and reading up on it, which is great. Like from the get-go, you don't stand up one, you stand up a bunch, and then they all work together. Not an expert, just from what I'm reading.
Yeah, I maybe I'm wrong, but I thought that MySQL, Cassandra, and the next thing on the list were all related to each other, or were offshoots of one another, but maybe not.
The next thing on the list is related.
Okay.
But I don't know if Cassandra's related. I must have missed that if it is.
Well, I could be completely wrong then. Anyway.
So the next one up, MariaDB. MariaDB server is one of the most popular open source relational databases. It's made by the original developers of MySQL and is guaranteed to stay open source. It's part of most cloud offerings and is the default in most Linux distributions. It's built upon the values of performance, stability, openness, and the MariaDB Foundation ensures contribution will accepted on technical merit. I have a list here of new functionality, advanced clustering, compatibility features of Oracle databases, temporal data tables, allowing one to query the data as it stood at any point in the past. That's something me and you both, not to put words in your mouth, like with the SQL Server feature we like, right? Temporal
tables. Temporal tables.
Yeah.
Temporal anomalies. Sorry.
Temporal anomalies. Not so fun. Yeah. It's community developed. It's open source. It's free. It's, I guess, what the original creators of MySQL wanted MySQL to be. I got the picture that, Oracle doesn't want MySQL to be open source. So MariaDB was created. Basically, development is led by the original developers of MySQL, who forked it due to concerns over its acquisition by Oracle Corporation in 2009. So,
yeah, and for its relationship to MySQL, I'm interested in MariaDB. I'm also kind of interested in how it looks different from MySQL, just to see, what did they do? What other choices did they make with MariaDB that they didn't make with MySQL, or that Oracle has chosen not to make with MySQL? It could be interesting. I would curious about that.
I don't know if this is still interesting, and I thought this is kind of interesting. So MariaDB is intended to maintain a very high compatibility with MySQL. So libraries, binary parity, whatever that means, not lead enough, and exact matching from MySQL's APIs and commands. So basically, their idea is it's a drop-in replacement for MySQL. The features are diverging, but it looks like it mentioned it has new storage engines like Area, Column Store, and MyRocks. Fun fact: MariaDB is named after. Let me find it here. MariaDB is named after Wideness. I hope I'm not slaughtering that name. Younger daughter MariaDB, right?
Nice.
MySQL is named after his other daughter.
My?
Yeah.
His other daughter's name is Mai.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
I'm on the market for female names, so. Okay. Next up, OrientDB. So I got some bullet
Sounds
points
like a
here.
train.
It just keeps on trucking.
Yeah.
OrientDB. The cliff notes I got here of some of the things you want to know. Quick installation. OrientDB can install and running less than 60 seconds. I don't know if that means less functionality to tweak on and off, but I mean, if that's important, great. Fully transactional, supports ACID transactions. Graph structures data model, native management of graphs, so it's not a bolt-in, not an add-on. Fully compliant with Apache Tinkerpop Gremlin, previously known as Blueprints, open source graph computing framework. I don't deal with graph pretty much at all. So, all corporate here, relational databases. But that sounds super interesting. SQL-wise, it supports SQL queries with extensions and handle relationships without SQL joins. I don't know why you want to do that, but manage trees and graph connected documents. So that's the key bullet points there. I don't know. Have you heard of that one?
No, I have not heard of OrientDB.
Cool. Are we okay on time? You good with me continuing through these? Am I churning through fast enough?
Yeah, I want to get to 13 and 16, of course.
Okay.
Other
You
than
want to keep
that,
going to those, or you want to skip ahead of those?
let's just skip to them. Yeah.
Okay, do it. Mine's not
DynamoDB.
numbered.
Yeah, so I wanted to mention Dynamo, or be sure that we did, because DynamoDB is fairly popular as a non-relational database from Amazon. And so I figured you had some interesting things that maybe you had dug up about Dynamo.
Yeah, so I got on DynamoDB, fully managed proprietary NoSQL database that supports key values and document data structures. It's offered by Amazon.com. As part of the portfolio. It exposes a similar data model and derives its name from Dynamo, but its differences but has different underlying implementation. Demo has a multi-ledger. Words are hard. Demo has a multi-leader design requiring the client to resolve version conflicts, and DynamoDB uses synchronous replication across multiple data centers for high durability and availability. That is interesting. So I wonder if that's a thing that, I don't want to say triggers you, but I wonder if that's a thing that seems really strange to you. So did you catch? I said requiring the client to resolve version conflicts.
Yeah, I caught that. That's interesting.
That is crazy. So in other words, so in SQL land, your database, I want to know all the things where X, and you get back a row or 5 rows. I want to know who's number 1 in the charts this month. Boop. It's Lee Markham. Go Lee Markham. But for Dynamo, the information changes. The different, I'm gonna use the word shards. I don't know what word they want to use for replication. The different shards, you say, hey, I want to know who's number 1. They all go, number 1 is, and like a multiverse MCU or Star Trek temporal thing, you get multiple answers.
Right.
It's Spider-Man, and you get Miles Morales, Peter Parker, and everyone else. And clearly it's Gwen. So yeah, that's super interesting. So it's basically like, yo, dog, we got all the info. You pick the winner. Crazy.
That does seem crazy to me. How can you have consistency of data like that? How do you, I don't know.
I think you get to pick. So like you get all the results and maybe you go by whichever one's the most recent.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm making that up. I think it's just up to you to implement that last
And
part.
what was the description on the availability again?
Let's see here.
Or the high availability?
Uses synchronous replication across multiple data centers for high durability and availability.
Okay.
Okay. Another interesting thing, it's schemaless except for the primary key. So it's schemaless, but there must be a primary key in there. So, which makes sense, I guess.
That's mysterious. There's the word I want, I think.
Okay.
Interesting.
And the list, if we have the same list, the one we skipped, I'll read just so we're up to date up to DynamoDB. It's also one of the ones that I want to mention. SQLite. SQLite is a lightweight and easy to use database that doesn't require any installation and configuration. It has many features of other common databases such as MySQL, and makes an excellent choice for web development like React Native. It is not a standalone app. Rather, it's a library that software developers embed into their apps. As such, it belongs to a family of embedded databases. It is the most widely deployed database engine, which is super interesting. It is the most widely developed, I said that wrong. It is the most widely deployed database engine, as it's used by several of the top web browsers, operating systems, mobile phones, and other dependent systems. Lee Markham, you are a DBA who specializes in SQL Server. You probably interact with SQLite more than you interact with SQL Server. And I don't have a problem saying that. It's crazy. That's why one your phone runs on it. Well, uses it.
Yeah. Yeah, I had heard a bit about SQLite before, and that it was pretty widespread. Why, it's used in a lot of different ways, is what I mean when I say that. And we actually have an app at my current employer that uses this as part of the way that we're using inventory collection. So SQLite, when I saw this on the list, I was like, oh, I know something about it, or heard it, used it. So that was interesting.
Cool. Yeah, I just find that fun. It's just part of the app. It's not a separate app. Go jump to the next one you want to jump to.
Oh, I wanted to talk about Microsoft Azure, of course. And part of why I wanted to talk about it is, it's interesting that on this list, it's something separate from SQL Server. Well, I found that to be interesting, and I guess it makes some sense because they are different products. Azure is a cloud product. SQL Server is started out as an on-prem, but you can obviously run SQL Server in the Azure cloud. You can also run it, in AWS, Google Cloud Platform, all kinds of places. But Azure is an interesting place because it's kind of the birthplace of all things cool that get funneled down to the folks.
It's the birthplace of all things cool.
Yes, we need to stop right there. Now, so Microsoft is very invested in Azure for obvious reasons. So when it develops something database related that's for SQL Server, it starts there, and then it gets pushed down into the on-prem platform. And this pushing down from Azure into SQL Server has actually created a situation where in the latest release for SQL Server 2022, there's more and more integration between the two worlds where they're actually reaching toward each other. We're going from on-prem and Azure, and you can actually do things back and forth now that weren't possible before, like with always-on availability groups, for example.
Yeah, that's actually pretty exciting.
And they're always developing new things. There's some cool things with the query store feature in SQL Server that started out in Azure, and there's constant development there. And the thing I wanted to mention about the cloud and Azure as well, and this is true for AWS, but might be surprising for folks who are hardcore Microsoft folks, is a lot of these database platforms that we've mentioned are available in Azure. So if you want to use MySQL and your company is, embedded in Microsoft, if they're using Azure, then you can have MySQL on Azure. You can do PostgreSQL and all kinds of, NoSQL kinds of offerings are still available on the Microsoft Azure platform. So just because it's Microsoft doesn't mean, it's just SQL Server. That's absolutely not the case.
These are honorable mentions. One of them is technically on a database. Okay. So I mentioned earlier we were discussing how different databases lean into different strengths, right? Mm-hmm. Ours is faster. Ours is easier to get up and running. Ours is a lower footprint. This one doesn't lean into the whole shardability as much. In its name, it'll tell you exactly, I hope, the stereotype that it's trying to go for. CockroachDB. It's called CockroachDB. What do you think it's trying to be good at?
It wants to live forever.
Yeah. So CockroachDB, I just love that name. I love the branding. CockroachDB is a commercial distributed SQL database management system developed by Cockroach Labs. CockroachDB stores copies of data in multiple locations in order to deliver speedy access. It's described as scalable, consistently replicated transactional data store. A single instance can scale from a single laptop to thousands of servers. CockroachDB is
so it spreads like cockroaches.
It spreads like cockroaches, right? They're just living up to the marketing. Stay to the brand. CockroachDB is designed to run in the cloud as it has a high fault tolerance. according to popular news outlets, is described as almost impossible to take down. Even if multiple servers or an entire data center were to go offline, CockroachDB will not stop working.
Wow. Okay.
And that's a quote from somebody that I didn't like put down the name. That's silly.
That's interesting. Oh.
Yeah, somebody doing a review was like, yeah, it's like, it's going to be as like all the database engines. It's going to be good at a bunch of database stuff. I don't even want to say okay. Let's just assume that all of the big databases are good at the database stuff. Each one has some strengths. CockroachDB from the branding on is like, we need to be hard to kill, and so I found I was reading those quotes.
Right.
I love that last one. Even if multiple servers or entire data server go offline, CockroachDB will not stop working. Like, that's just cool. Like, we're not trying to compete with Redis. We're not going to race the Flash. I'm not saying they're slow. I'm just saying like that what they're leaning into is we ain't gonna die.
Right.
Found that to be super interesting. It's something I want to play with at some point. So this one, I kind of cheated. It's not a database per se.
Okay.
When you mentioned DynamoDB, I thought you were saying this. I misheard you, which is why I was jumping to the end of the list.
Okay.
NoDB, INNODB. It's a storage engine for the database management system MySQL. That's why I say I'm kind of cheating. And MariaDB. Maria.
I go with Maria.
Maria, yeah. Since the release of MySQL 5.5.5 in 2010, it replaced MyISAM, I don't know, as MySQL's default table type. It provides the standard ACID compliance, transactional features, along with foreign key support. This came across to me as being being very fast, and I don't have it noted here, so I don't know if I got distracted looking it up. So I'm not misstating this.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought I include this because it has. Well, you're used to B trees. All the database engines use B trees. Gosh, I wish someone could ping me and let me know if I'm wrong about this. This had something called Fractal. Maybe it's another database, and maybe I'm getting confused. All right, we're changing the subject, so I don't misquote and say it. Have you heard of fractal trees being used in databases?
No.
I geeked out. I got distracted from this completely. So that's probably why it's not here. It could be another database. Someone tell us in the comments which databases have fractal trees.
When I hear that, though, when you said fractal, I was going to show my age here, but the first thing that came to mind has nothing to do with databases at all. I immediately in my head went to Fraggle Rock. Because
Fraggle Rock.
Yes. Because of the
board. Boring.
Because it rhymes. It sounds similar. So my mind just went there. I don't know.
So when I was introduced to the Mandelbrot set, Julia set, fractals, they've always been something that's interesting to me. Very cool. But so I was like, what is this? Why would you call this a fractal tree? What is it? So in your mind's eye, imagine. Do you want to explain B tree for the people listening real quick? Do you feel comfortable doing that? I could take it if it's a weird thing.
I'm trying to remember what I could, I guess, but
there's a clue. It's not a binary tree.
No, it is. It's also not a tree full of bees that sting you. So
I get stung.
Oh my God, that would be awful. Okay. Anyway, I hate bees. I hate anything that flies and stings. Anyway, so B tree, if you took a tree and you pulled it out of the ground and turned it upside down so that the tree roots are now in the air, and you basically kind of have a pyramid. Let me go this way with my hand. A pyramid from the root up here down to what you want. If you think of like a dictionary list of names, you have A at the very top, and then you break down to A, B, and all the way across. And depending on how many names you have is the levels of the tree, and it uses the different levels of the tree to traverse. So it knows to go from the top to A if it's looking for Markham, it goes not to the far left, far this direction where A is. It goes down to where M is. And then it finds MA and it keeps going down until it finds the block that has Markham. So that's a super simplified, fast explanation of B tree.
So you traverse the tree. You have left and right choices as you go down, but all the data's on the leaves.
Yep.
The bottom, right?
Down the bottom.
So a fractal tree is very similar to that. And most databases, the pages are stored. So the tree is made up, all the pages with the data on the bottom are how many? Well, what size?
In SQL Server, 8K pages stored in extents that are 64K in size.
Okay. I'm used to 8K pages. I probably should have said most. I keep seeing that repeated, like around 8, some 16s. I probably should have said most, but SQL Server 8K, right? 8KB. So fractal trees, the nodes can be on pages that, I shouldn't call them pages. Okay. So it's the same concept. Let's start the same concept. In your mind's eye, imagine the B tree as well as your mind's eye. Imagine a B tree. You have all the data going across the bottom. So that way you can quickly scan across when you seek, and then you can scan across. Fractal trees, each node. So you go down, like you said, the M for Markham and MA, and you divert traffic left to right. Each node has a message queue on it. Already it's getting weird. The message queue can be up to, I saw like an implementation that was like a gigabyte, like huge. So we'll forget 8K. So the message queues can be rather large. And so writes don't necessarily propagate to the leaves right away. In my simple understanding, when you do a write, it goes to the last node that makes sense, and then makes a message there. Hey, update these rows. Makes a little note to self later. And it's like lazy propagation. And then, so if you have, it comes across to me that if you have a really fast OLTP that's super write heavy, you'll propagate it down when you have a chance, and you just write to it. I couldn't find any information on like when do they propagate to the leaves? Like, is it upon read? Is it like literally when it catches its breath? Is it happen on a regular basis when certain queues get too long? But it was super interesting that like someone decided to experiment with this, and they, again, I thought it was in a DB, but I messed up. It could have been another one. I should have actually made sure I noted this when I got excited about it, but it made that system much faster. So super interesting. I definitely wanted to share that with you. I want to share that with everyone. I'm probably going to be looking at that more and get a better understanding, because it seems really, really cool, really interesting outside the box thinking there.
Yeah, it does seem like an interesting concept. I'll have to, in all my spare time, take a look at it as well. I need 3 of me to look at all the things I always say that I'll look at in my spare time.
Yeah. 1 to do the home stuff, 1 to do the work, and 1 to do all the stuff that would be cool to research, right?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, very cool. All right, anything you want to touch on before we close out the vid here?
I don't think so. It was an interesting conversation about what the options are, and I don't think I have anything additional to add.
In that case, thanks everybody for tuning into Ready Set Data. I'm glad you could join us on the interwebs. Feel free to like and subscribe. We can use the attention, right? I'm Anthony Fortner, data engineer.
I'm Lee Markham, database administrator. Y'all have a good night.
Bye, everybody.